I think the first major switch was understanding that I could not do both well. I had to pick, do I want to be a clinician or do I want to be a business owner? I really, you know, early on decided that I wanted to be a business owner because nobody else on my team could do that. I had people who could be therapists and who could be trained to be good therapists, but I didn't have anybody else who I could train to take on the role of CEO.
Mhm.
So I let my clients know, unfortunately, I'm going to have to pass you on to another therapist. I have a lot of responsibilities now that the business is growing. These are people that have worked with me as their therapist for several years, but it was time for me to make that decision and to delegate my caseload to some of the other clinicians. So that was difficult, but that was the biggest mindset shift that I had to make was that I could no longer operate as just a clinician. I needed to think about the future of my business and how I was going to step into that CEO role.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Pivot to Profit. I have the amazing powerhouse Ebony Green with me today. How are you, girl?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. First of all, you called me a powerhouse in my intro. I'm just grateful to be here. So thank you, Pam, for having me on your podcast today.
Absolutely. Well, let me give you the share your bio with everyone so now they'll understand why I said that you're a powerhouse. So Ebony is a multi-seven-figure founder, educator, and speaker who teaches allied healthcare entrepreneurs how to scale quickly and intentionally. After growing her own speech language pathology practice to $3 million in 5 years, Ebony became known for her signature philosophy of intentional acceleration, the art of building speed with strategy and sustainability. Through her company, the SLP Business Suite, Ebony empowers service-based CEOs to design businesses that run with purpose, not pressure. Her work bridges systems, leadership, and mindset to help women build freedom on purpose. That's why you're a powerhouse. Come on now.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I actually scaled my business to $2 million. I'm just saying.
That point two matters. Let's go, girl.
I am, someone who did not come from a business background. I am a clinician by trade. I'm a speech language pathologist. So what I'm excited about this podcast is that I get to share my story as someone who was trained in a totally different field, who became an entrepreneur and has been able to scale successfully. I think that there are a lot of stories about people who start businesses and don't know what they're doing. And, it's very inspirational to hear when they succeed. But I also feel like in certain spaces, in my space in particular, there's not a lot of examples of someone scaling past that seven-figure mark. And there are a few. I've helped a lot of people actually scale their business, but we need to see more examples of this in our industry. We also need to see more women across the board scaling to seven figures. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you about money, which is a taboo subject in business.
Isn't it funny? All right, so let's dive in, Ebony. To start with, what did you want to be when you were a little kid?
I wanted to be on TV, so I wanted to be a meteorologist. And it turns out that I wasn't very good at math. And to become a meteorologist, you had to know a lot of math and a lot of science. I loved science, but math was definitely not my forte. So I pivoted and I decided I'll have to be on TV another way. So I then went into radio, television, film. That was my undergraduate major in college. I loved radio, television, film, but I did not like that it was more of theory and a lot of film sessions late into the evening and not a whole lot of me being in front of the camera, which is what I thought I wanted to do. So I pivoted again. And I thought, what if I used my gift for speaking, encouraging other people to be a teacher? So I actually went into teaching
Okay.
and that pivoted from teaching into speech language pathology.
Okay. Awesome. So, as little Ebony was dreaming of being on TV, what were you taught about money? What did your parents, society teach you about money? Was it good? Is it bad? Should you want it? Should you not?
What I was taught about money was that you have to work hard to earn it. I grew up in a single parent household. My mother is a first generation immigrant who immigrated to the United States at a very young age, early adulthood. So she had to figure out a lot on her own. And one of the things that she had to figure out was how to raise me and my siblings as a single mother. She became a widow when we were still kids. So I witnessed her working two jobs. I witnessed how hard she had to work for her money and how we had to hold on to every cent that she earned. I remember one time when I was little that we were at the laundromat washing clothes because we didn't even have our own washer and dryer. We lived in a very small house. And she told me to watch her purse because she had just gotten her check. She just cashed her check. So she had all her money in her purse. So she said, watch my purse. I'm going to go to the dryer. She moved the clothes from the washer to the dryer. Well, I was probably only like 5 or 6. Of course, I wasn't paying attention, and someone took my mom's purse with her entire paycheck
Oh no.
in it. And I just remember how devastated my mom was because she worked so hard. So that money story stuck with me. You have to work really hard for your money and you have to hold on to all of your money because there's a chance that someone can take it and you won't ever get it back. That was something that stuck with me for a long time.
That's crazy. Have you and your mom ever had a conversation about that memory?
We have, yes, we have. And I tell her now how grateful I am that she was such a hard worker and she figured out how she was going to pay the bills and, how we were going to make ends meet until she got paid again. But yeah, I think it, was a lesson that taught me that, what parents always say, money doesn't grow on trees. Like you work hard for money, you need to hold on to it.
Yeah. So went to college teaching, then decided speech pathology. So how did that come about?
I found out about this field when I was in the classroom. Some of my students received speech and language therapy, and speech pathology is actually an interesting field because you can work in the education setting, but you can also work in the medical setting. So some SLPs work in public schools and some work in hospital settings. So the first SLP I met was someone who worked on campus where I was teaching. And she just encouraged me to look into speech pathology as a possible career change after I finished my teaching assignment. I was in a program called Teach for America. And so you're assigned to teach for 2 years in an underserved community. And then you can either decide to stay in the classroom or do something else. So she encouraged me to look into speech language pathology because she knew that I was bilingual. I taught bilingual Spanish speaking second graders and third graders when I was in the classroom. And she said how important it was to have bilingual speech language pathologists because a lot of the kids that were receiving services who were bilingual needed support in their native language or needed to be tested in their native language so that they don't get misidentified as having a language disorder when it's just a language difference.
Yeah.
So that was one of the main reasons. And then she also said, that she noticed just how dedicated I was to helping the kids who were receiving speech services and that, everything that I was doing to reinforce what she was doing with them in therapy was really helping the students. So I said, okay, I'll think about it, and then moved from Texas to Arizona. And when I moved here, I was like, okay, I'm going to start something new. And so that's kind of how I found out about it and why I decided to go into speech.
And so you were a clinician after a teacher. So were you in the schools or were you in the hospital setting when you first started out? Where were you located?
I was in the schools. I felt most comfortable being in the schools after teaching for 4 years. I actually stayed 2 years past my assignment. So I felt comfortable working in the school setting as an SLP, and that's what I did. But then I started to look into more of the medical side as well because I was just curious about what it was like to work in a clinic. So I started working for someone who had a private clinic. And this person actually was one of the very first mentors that I had who inspired me to start my own clinic. So after working for them for a number of years and working in the schools for a number of years, I kind of decided that at some point I wanted to own my own clinic, and it happened very quickly after I finished all of my graduate coursework.
What inspired you to be a business owner? You said your mentor helped with that, but
Yeah.
did you see that that path made sense? Where was the alignment or the light bulb that was like, yes, that's what I want?
Well, I had a bad experience working at the last school where I worked. This school it was a pretty new school, new administration, and they had a lot of students on campus. It was like a K through 8, lots of kids on campus. And because there were so many kids with IEPs and who needed speech therapy services, they really needed like 2 full-time people to manage all of the students that needed services. But I was there part-time. I got hired as a part-time clinician to work at that school. Within the first couple of months, I burned out. I mean,
It's just too much.
I didn't even make it to, I think Thanksgiving break. I didn't even make it to Thanksgiving break. I quit before Thanksgiving break. So that was the moment when I decided I was going to pivot and bet on myself and start my private practice.
So did that mean you went and leased an office? Did you work out of your home? Did you go to students? Like, what did that originally like? Ebony's going to start a business. Let's go. What did that look like?
Yeah, yeah. So I bootstrapped my business, which means I started with just a few $1,000s that I had in savings while I was working for other people and while I was working in the schools. My husband and I decided to start a debt-free journey.
Hmm.
So we followed Dave Ramsey and basically started paying off all of our debt. He had just completed his MBA in finance and was very dedicated about all of our long-term financial goals. And we started basically living on a very tight budget, paying off credit card debt, paying off student loans until we got to the point of not having any debt except for our house. So right around the time that I decided to start my business, we had just gotten out of debt. And of course, I was not going to get us back in debt by
No.
taking out any loans. As I mentioned, my husband works in finance, very financially savvy. And so he also made sure that if this was what I was going to do, I was not going to get us into any more debt. So I used whatever I had in savings. I started working out of a co-working space. I was seeing most of my patients throughout the day. I was driving into their homes to see them instead of having them come to the co-working space because I didn't even have an office. It was just like a seat at a table. Um, and then I would use their conference room to interview therapists that I would hire. So that's how I got started. Um, I think I paid like $40 every time I would use the conference room. And then I had like a $25 a month like membership where I could go and work there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was how I started. I was doing all of the things, not just the therapy, but I was the HR, I was the marketing person. We were running payroll. I was doing basically everything.
So tell me about a financial win early on in those days, Ebony, where you're like, you know what? I think this is going to work. This is going to pay the bills.
So a financial win came when I finally hired someone to do my medical billing. Medical billing and coding is something that is very complicated. And if you are not trained in medical billing and coding, you can spend a lot of time spinning your wheels and trying to figure out how to get paid, which is very detrimental to your business when you have people who are working that you're paying, but you're not getting paid.
Yes.
So I had some therapists working for me. We had a steady influx of referrals, but when it came to the payments and reimbursement, that was a disaster. I was not able to figure out how to do billing. I hired someone who actually also did not know how to do billing, even though I vetted them. They promised that they knew how to get us paid, and they did not know um, how to get us paid. So I ended up hiring another person who had been reaching out to me and decided, if this other person isn't getting me paid, then I might as well try someone else. And I remember the first time they sat down and audited all of the claims that we had submitted that had been returned to us unpaid. Those claims went through again through this new person. We got paid, and our first payment was $20,000. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Thank goodness, because there wasn't very much left in my savings to continue to pay people while I was not getting paid.
Yeah, it's crazy how with medical billing or even just invoicing clients, if they drag their feet, you've got to bank everything because you still have to pay your rent. You've still got to pay your people. You've still got to pay for all your materials and services. And it either comes out of your pocket or it doesn't come out. So amazing that you made that switch. So, what were some big steps that you made to go from clinician to entrepreneur? Like mindset shifts. What did you do to get from I'm fulfilling for clients to now I'm building a multi-million dollar empire?
I think the first major switch was understanding that I could not do both well. I had to pick, do I want to be a clinician or do I want to be a business owner? I really, you know, early on decided that I wanted to be a business owner because nobody else on my team could do that. I had people who could be therapists and who could be trained to be good therapists, but I didn't have anybody else who I could train to take on the role of CEO. So I let my clients know, unfortunately, I'm going to have to pass you on to another therapist. I have a lot of responsibilities now that the business is growing. You know, these are people that have worked with me as their therapist for several years, but it was time for me to make that decision and to delegate my caseload to some of the other clinicians. So that was difficult, but that was the biggest mindset shift that I had to make was that I could no longer operate as just a clinician. I needed to think about the future of my business and how I was going to step into that CEO role.
That is so huge. And I see entrepreneurs struggle with it all the time because they start their business because they're passionate about whatever it is they do. And they just want to do that, but do it their own way. So they start a business. But there's a point where it really does switch, where it's like you can't just be the provider, you've got to be the CEO. And it is a huge mind shift because you have to delegate. And that's hard because especially you've had those clients for years and then you're passing them off. Like that's how did you handle that delegation? Were you like done is better than perfect? If they do it 80% as good as me, like what was your mindset around delegation? Because I see a lot of entrepreneurs struggling with that.
Well, my mindset around delegation was to, first of all, model how the task needed to be done. So I had a whole system of this is how you have an initial visit with a patient. This is how you do your session notes. This is how you should be communicating with the patient regularly or with the parent. Training every single therapist that was assigned a caseload on how we do things at my company, right? How I would do it. So the training was the first step. And once I trained them and once they were able to demonstrate competence through that training, then I was able to trust them to do it just like I would.
I love it. What were some challenges that you had around building a team? Because as you scale and you step into your CEO seat, you've got to have a team around that's supporting you. So, what were some challenges? Because running a multi seven figure firm means you've got a big head count. So, talk to me about your team.
Yeah, so I grew a lot of therapists on my team very quickly. I knew that the therapists were the money makers. So I was trying to get as many therapists through the door because they were making the money that impacted the bottom line, right? But then I started to realize the more therapists that I hire, the more responsibilities I'm adding to my plate because I have to be the contact person for them. I have to solve their problems. I have to put out their fires, right? And so now I have a team of 15 or 20 therapists that are all depending on me for everything. And as I mentioned, I was doing all of the admin in my business at first. I was running payroll, I was doing all the marketing, I was doing all the hiring, the recruiting. So there was a point in which I didn't even have time to hire more people, and I became a bottleneck in my business. I could not grow any further because I had hired all these therapists, but I didn't have the admin support to help take things off my plate so that I could continue to grow the business.
Mhm.
So I can't remember if it was 2021. I believe it was 2021. I just was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I'm like an IKEA cabinet that looks good because I have all these therapists, but on the inside, the structure is not there. This cabinet's going to break, right? If I add one more plate in this cabinet, it's going to break. I just thought about all the things that someone else could be doing that I was doing. And I was determined that by the end of that year, I was going to have four people. I don't know why the number four stood out to me, but I was like, I need four solid people in admin roles to support me because I can no longer oversee all these therapists. And even though I had given up all of my patients for um, the home health visits that we were doing in our clinic, I got a school contract. So I was contracted by a school district to do some of their therapy services. And it was really good money. So I didn't turn it down. I said, sure, I'll do it. I didn't have a caseload in the clinic or doing home health. So I took on that responsibility as well, in addition to hiring all these therapists. And by the end of that year, I hired those four admin people. I hired a clinical director, I hired a fractional CFO, I hired someone to manage the HR stuff. There was one other person I don't remember. Billing. I think billing was the fourth person. I already had billing, but I had four people on my admin team to support me, and that was a game changer.
Yeah. You talk about intentional acceleration. Define that for us and how it's played a role in your story.
Yeah, I think when you're building, you have to be intentional about what it is that you're building and where you're going. You'll get a lot of distractions along the way as your business starts to grow because it's hard. It's hard to build a company, it's hard to scale. And a lot of times we want to take the easy route or take the path of least resistance. So we'll see other shiny objects that we feel like are going to get us to our destination faster, or this is a new thing that everybody's doing, so I need to start doing it too. You need to remember what your vision is and your mission is for your company and stick to that. So that's what I mean by building intentionally. We were approached by an insurance company to start doing services outside of what we were already doing, and it wasn't really in alignment with the team that I had in place or kind of the vision of the company. But I was like, sure, why not? Let's just see. That whole side project ended costing us $10,000. So we ended a contract with the insurance company with a deficit of $10,000 because for whatever reason, we just couldn't get it off the ground. It just wasn't working out the way we thought it would. So when I say build intentionally, what I mean is always refer back to your mission and your vision and what it is that you actually want to do. Do not get distracted by the shiny objects that are going to appear out of nowhere sometimes that could potentially end up costing you money or slowing you down to get to your destination.
I love that. And I see it far too often in entrepreneurs. They get the shiny object, or I call it squirrel. Like, I feel like most entrepreneurs might not be ADHD, but we kind of are just a little bit because it's like, oh, well, Ebony, you want to go start this, or let's go have a retreat, or let's go do this, and let's do this. And there's so many options. And so, successful entrepreneurs, there's a season where you just have to put your head down and focus and understand what your goals are and just get it done. So, intentional acceleration, I love that. That's beautifully wordsmithed. That's magical. You mentioned that one of the hires that you had was a fractional CFO. So, how has understanding your finances played a role in your ability to scale your service-based business?
One of the tasks that I was doing in those early stages of my business was I was doing all the bookkeeping, and it was a disaster because I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm not a I don't even balance my own personal finance budget. So to have to do that for my business and to make sure that everything's categorized and to learn how to use QuickBooks, my head was spinning. And I did it because I didn't have the money to hire initially, or so I thought, you know. I probably could have hired someone a lot sooner, but my husband works in finance, so he kind of managed the books whenever he had time. But it was just like every month having to be like, oh my God, I need to go categorize all these transactions. And like, it just became very cumbersome. So in 2021, when I decided I was no longer going to do all these tasks that were not things that I should be doing, I hired a fractional CFO. And having that fractional CFO really changed the game for me because not only were they doing all of the bookkeeping and making sure everything is categorized, they're now giving me reports, they're sending me budgets, they're making sure that when payroll gets run, that there's no extra stuff getting taken out, or if an audit needs to be done, that we can do the audit and me not feel like, oh my gosh, this is too overwhelming for me to do by myself. Like they just made sure that financially my company was healthy and sound. And it was extra reassurance that I can continue to build and grow and not slow down because the money was there and they were keeping track of it for me.
So, where you are in your business now, what are some key metrics or numbers that you track on a weekly or monthly basis to be able to know, am I good or do I have a problem? What are some key numbers that that CFO is sharing with you and that you're looking at?
Yeah, so on a weekly basis, we look at how many visits we have on the schedule. We look at how many visits were kept, how many visits were canceled. We look at revenue on a weekly basis. We look at our AR on a weekly basis. So those are just some of the key things right off the bat. I tell a lot of the people that I coach, because I coach women in my, or I guess not just women, but I coach SLPs in my program. Your finances are like the backbone of your business. You know, you have to know all these numbers. And even though we're a multi-million-dollar company, I never stop looking at the numbers because at any given point, like things can go left, right? You have to anticipate things before they come up. And looking at your numbers is the best way to do that. So one of the things that my CFO did, which at first I didn't really like because I didn't understand it, was switching me from a cash basis to an accrual basis on my accounting and my P&Ls. And at first I didn't understand, like, why do we have to do it this way? It's so confusing, but it actually makes a lot of sense because now we have invoices that are reflected in QuickBooks that I know when people owe me money, right? I know when those invoices are paid off, and it's not confusing because we sent out an invoice in January, but the payment didn't come until February. So now my February is looking like I made more money than it did. And this is a common occurrence that a lot of people in my industry, especially, go through. And it's like, well, I don't understand my numbers because I invoiced this school this month, but it didn't come in until 2 months later. So I'm just like, you have to have a good financial person to explain this to you and to manage that. That's not a part of your job.
Yeah, I love it. So you just mentioned you also do mentoring. So explain that because you have a successful practice with therapists serving clients, but then you started to coach others. So help us understand that.
Yeah, in 2020, I actually started coaching and I was only 2 years into my private practice. But one of the things that helped save my business during COVID was getting contracts with school districts who were in desperate need of speech language pathologists. A lot of their SLPs went on leave or they decided they didn't want to work during COVID. So school districts went virtual and they hired contract companies to provide the services while their teachers were not working or while they couldn't find people to provide those virtual services for the students. So 2020 was like one of the biggest years for my company. You know, I was only in business for 2 years, but between year one and year two, there was a significant amount of growth because of the school contracts that I was getting. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to teach other people how to get contracts with school districts because that can potentially save their whole practice. And I started teaching a course online called the School Contracting Masterclass. People kept asking for more classes, more information. You know, they wanted to learn more about growing and scaling their business besides just getting school contracts. So that is how I started coaching. That's how I started mentoring other people. And I've now been coaching and mentoring online for over 5 years. I've helped hundreds of speech language pathologists and other allied health professionals in private practice. And it's something that I truly enjoy. I think this will be something that I do even beyond me owning my private practice.
Investing in others because in school they teach you how to be a speech pathologist. They don't teach you how to run a business and be a speech pathologist. So I love that you're doing that. So what's on the horizon for you? What's coming up?
So what's on the horizon for me is I will be hosting a live conference for all of the SLPs that I coach and mentor and all of those who I haven't had a chance to work with yet, but want to be in a room and attend a conference for people who are just like them and want to learn more about business. As I mentioned, one of my I guess, goals is to close that gap between the clinical knowledge and business knowledge, or lack thereof, in our field. And so I'm writing a whole dissertation about this. This is the research that I'm doing for my dissertation. And I'm actually out there, boots on the ground, trying to provide the education, the resources, and the community for people in my field who want to start a business but don't even know where to start, or who want to start a business but need mentorship because they don't have a business background like most of us. So the next thing is my conference, and hopefully continuing to grow my community.
Amazing. This is awesome. Ebony, where can people connect with you to learn more about your practice and your event?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Ebony Green, and my practice is the Speak Center. So we're online on Instagram as at the Speak Center, or on Facebook. And my conference is called the Made for More SLP Business Conference, and we're online on Instagram. Our handle is at Made for More SLP.
Ebony, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your profit story with us and your amazing journey. Super excited that you are part of our community now, and looking forward to your event in July of 2026. I will actually be there as a speaker, so I'm super pumped to be sharing this stage and to help these entrepreneurs learn about the money side of their business, because it is so important when you're running your business to have a strong handle on the money, because you can help more people if there's money in the bank and you're not stressed about making payroll.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Pam. I'm looking forward to having you speak at the conference as well.
I appreciate it. That's all for today's episode. Make sure you like and subscribe. And if you need help understanding your numbers, just go to pamjordan.com. My team would love to speak to you. And remember, it's not what you make that matters, it's what you keep.